So in the last video, we discussed the blood supply to the kidney, and so now it's time to take a look at the kidney portion of this whole business. And so we'll dive into what a nephron is in this video. So we'll start first with nephron anatomy. The nephron begins at the glomerular capsule. I think in the last one I called it the renal capsule. I'm sorry. The glomerular capsule is the name for this structure that has the glomerulus inside. So here's the glomerulus, afferent, efferent artery here. Sorry, a little sloppy. And so this is a cup-like chamber that surrounds the glomerulus, and we're going to see in a minute that there are a couple of layers. There is a visceral layer and a parietal layer to the glomerular capsule. And together, between the glomerulus and the capsule itself, we have what is referred to as the renal corpuscle. And the renal corpuscle then is the business end of the nephron, the place where all of the fluids, or much of the fluid that is in the blood, is going to be squeezed out of the capillaries of the glomerulus. So, as I said, there is we've got a good picture in the book. I don't know the page, but I may be able to tell you the picture number, and again, I could have this all up and going, but I didn't. So we have a visceral layer to the glomerular capsule and a parietal layer as well. And I'm still looking for the picture. So if you look at it doesn't give me well, it doesn't matter what the image number is, but it is the picture that shows the glomerular capsule and the afferent and efferent arteriole and glomerulus in really large view. And you can notice from that picture that there are two layers to the glomerular capsule. So this is the glomerulus here. And here would be the parietal layer, the wall layer of the glomerular capsule. And this that I'm drawing here is the visceral layer of the glomerular capsule. And it's formed of cells that are podocytes. You've seen that term before. If you recall, back in the chapter on the parts of the nervous system. In the central nervous system, it was the podocytes that reached out and sealed up the crevices or the cracks between the cells of the capillary walls. And so they reached out, they sealed them up, creating the blood-brain barrier. We see a similar function here, but slightly different. Notice that as the podocytes reach out, they form these crazy branches that make like a mesh that covers the gaps between the capillary walls. It creates these things called slit pores or fenestri. This is a term that means window in Latin. So in French, a window is fenestra. In Spanish, it's a ventana. So the same root there, fena, is the root that means window. So it creates these little spaces, and that allows the water, the fluids of the blood, to squeeze out, but it retains, if the kidney is functioning properly, the proteins inside the blood. So the parietal layer is continuous with the rest of what we refer to as the renal tubule. So that's where we're going to then shape the fluids that we squeeze out of the blood to form urine. So it's between these two layers that fluid is forced out of the capillaries and into this space that is the renal caps. That's the renal. That space around the glomerulus, inside the glomerular capsule. And of course, this is a layer of cells. So these are all these cells here. This is also that layer of cells that are the podocytes. And then you've got the endothelial cells that compose the capillaries. So we force out this fluid, and now it's as if this fluid is external to the body. I think I used the kind of vivid image of a finger that is long and thin enough that it could reach up into the urethra, into the urinary bladder, poke around and find its way up the ureters, into the renal pelvis, and then following the structures of the kidney, could reach up and tickle the glomerulus here. So I like to think of this space as being outside the body. This is where we're putting all the stuff that will be eliminated. I'm sitting here drawing while I'm talking with you too. But so here's where we put the fluids that are going to be eliminated from the body. So anything that is in this space here is headed out of the body. Okay, so how does all this function? So they're in the renal corpuscle because of blood pressure. So it's hydrostatic pressure. We push the plasma out of the glomerulus through those fenestrae, the slit pores, and into that capsular space. So this is all filtration. So if you think back to the ways that we move fluids from one side of a cell layer to the other, this is filtration. And if the kidney is healthy, then the filtrate that we produce is protein-free. All of the proteins are going to be retained in the blood and kept out of the developing urine. So that filtrate first flows into the renal tubule, or then flows into the renal tubule. So I'm going to draw kind of a simplified version here of the passageways through which the developing urine flows. So here we have the glomerular capsule. The fluid then flows into what's called the renal tubule, which is composed of first the proximal convoluted tubule, proximal because it's nearest the glomerulus, and then it flows down the descending limb of the nephron loop, and then up the ascending limb of the nephron loop, and then into the distal convoluted tubule. And then that distal convoluted tubule dumps into what's called a collecting duct, and there are numerous distal convoluted tubules from other nephrons that are also dumping into this collecting duct. So, other nephrons are out here attached to these little inputs into the collecting duct. And so it's called tubular fluid. The fluid makes it into here. Different colors, but the fluid makes it through the proximal convoluted tubule into the nephron loop, into the distal convoluted tubule, and by the time it makes it into the collecting duct, then we call it urine. So it's tubular fluid while it's in the tube, and then by the time it's in the collecting duct, it's urine. And these collecting ducts then pass through the renal pyramids, and ducts merge together. Multiple ducts will merge until they get to a region called the renal papillus. Here at the renal papillus, all the urine dumps into one of the minor calyces. So renal papilla are multiple. Papilla is plural. Papillus would be singular. And so they're dumping into a minor calyx. From the minor calyces, They will then go into the major calyces and then on into the renal pelvis. Okay, so find in your book the slide labeled the juxtaglomerular, or not the slide, but the image labeled the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And I want you to take notice of the anatomy there. So where the ascending limb of the nephron loop touches back to the afferent and efferent arterioles. So we have this region where as the urine is passing through the ascending limb, it comes near to where the afferent and efferent arterioles are coming into the renal corpuscle. That is referred to as the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And here, at the nephron loop, the cells are really densely packed together, referred to as the macula densa. So the macula densa is this region of the juxtaglomerular apparatus that is part of the nephron loop. Now, the cells of the arterioles are enlarged here, and they are referred to as the juxtaglomerular cells. Juxta means if something is juxtapositioned, it's nearby. So the juxta part is saying that, okay, this is a structure that is right near the glomerulus. So the juxtaglomerular apparatus is this collection of specialized cells from the nephron loop, so that's kidney, and from the afferent and efferent arterioles. So it's a combination of both urinary system and cardiovascular system. And they notice blood pressure. And in response to low blood pressure, they release this material called renin. Renin is an enzyme. And when renin is present in the blood, we see a cascade of events that we'll talk about in just a minute that results in the adrenal cortex. So now we're looking at the adrenal glands. And if this is a kidney, the adrenal glands is this pyramid mass of tissue here. We see the cortex of the adrenal glands, and that's the outer rind of the adrenal gland. That cortex releases a material called aldosterone. And with aldosterone around, the kidney will hang on to sodium ions, and it will excrete potassium ions. And if we hang on to sodium, hold on to sodium, what are we going to see? We're going to see water being retained. So because sodium is in the blood, more sodium, then we're going to retain water. As the blood plumps up again with water, then we're going to see an increase in blood pressure. Okay, so now we're going to want you to look around a little bit more and find the picture that shows a little pie slice of the kidney tissue. And this is showing where the nephrons are located. And we have two locations for nephrons. If the glomerulus and most of the nephron loop are located in the cortex, then that is a cortical nephron. And this is about 80% of our nephrons. So they're busy doing a lot of work. If the glomerulus is right next to that, right next to the boundary between the cortex and the medulla, for some reason wrote juxtaglomerular, then it is a juxtamedullary nephron. So juxtamedullary nephrons are found at that border between the cortex and the renal medulla. And the nephron loop of a juxtamedullary nephron extends deeply into the medulla. This is about 20% of the nephron, and they are very important in regulating water balance. Sorry, my phone just went off. Just stop. Martin, could you call Dad? So As we've talked about before, the afferent arteriole brings blood to the glomerulus. The efferent arteriole carries blood away from the glomerulus and toward the nephron loop. We call that capillary network around the nephron tube the peritubular capillaries. And in the juxtamedullary nephrons, these loops follow the nephron loop deep there into the renal medulla, and we refer to that capillary network, it has a special name, called the vasa recta. So the vessels, I don't know why recta. Because they going up, they follow, recta would be up and down, they follow that portion of the nephron loop. Okay, so there we are, a little bit of the nephron anatomy, and if you have any questions, send me an email.